Ed here. Welcome to Lessons from My Mentor. This one goes way back, comes from Parkview Episcopal Medical Center. One of my very first mentors. I've mentioned him before. His name was Dave. He was the COO, and he really gave me a lot of great ideas for my career, many of which I am sharing with you. So this one has to do with engaging at a deep level with your customers. And so this is super critical, and oftentimes we find ourselves too busy to do it. So we don't, or we don't do it enough. But I'm telling you, when I look back on my career, one of the things that's helped me a great deal has been super levels of engagement. It takes a little bit of time and extra effort, but well worth it, because the outcomes, ideally at the end of the day for the patient and those that you serve, but also there's outcomes that accrue to you in terms of your level of influence in the organization and your ability to make change happen. So he was always about encourage me to really understand what the customer was going through. So if it was finance, like understand finance at a deep level, the clinical side, the patient side, that was the genesis for a lot of the programs that I've done throughout my career and continue to do when I can, when the situation enables that, and always encouraging others to do it. So what I'm talking about here is getting super involved, and I'm not just talking a surface level. So one really easy one, and the beautiful thing about, I think, the majority of the things that we talk about, unless it's from our mentors, is they're all free. So you can't say, I don't have any money to do that. They just take a willingness to make change for yourself and then execute on it. So when it comes to the clinical practice, I would shadow nurses routinely and clinicians, other clinicians, physicians routinely. Again, not a one-time event, but these were routine events. And many of you know I've had my entire IT teams do this as well because of the mass scale and other reasons. You know, we only did that once per year, but when you're there 5-8 years, that's 5 or 8 touches. And hopefully people continue, the leaders after you continue those sort of programs. But for myself, I would do it much more often. In fact, at the Cleveland Clinic, I spent one shift a week in the OR. So I had an anesthesia background. I was able to leverage that. So I worked from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. every Wednesday in the OR. I didn't advertise it. In fact, I had a name badge that was had a different name because we didn't want people to be intimidated, my coworkers, those sort of things about, oh, there's an executive, you know, working. So we kept it on the quiet, and I didn't advertise it. And people, the clinicians figured it out eventually, but it wasn't anything that was made a big deal, because the reason is for me to get really knowledgeable about those who I'm serving. And I did learn a lot of new things. Oh my gosh, did I learn a lot that I was able then to take back to IT and work with the clinician leaders and make some changes. So, and I saw patients all the time and those sort of things. So there are definitely things that you can do to get deeper involved with your organization. And so that was just one of them. Another one is have your meetings where your clients live. So unfortunately, executives and IT for sure have a reputation about the ivory tower, and we never get out, you know, we're never visible. So what we did is we held all of our meetings with the client. So in this last instance, again, I'll just use Cleveland Clinic example, but, you know, apply it to your own. It could be a single hospital. It'll still work the same way. So we had, let's just say in the region, we had 12 hospitals, and then we had 23 or so institutes. These were, you know, like cardiology, cardiovascular would be an institute, you know, these specialties. So there was like 23. And then if you think about corporate functions, supply chain, finance, HR, you know, depending again how your organization is developed. So for us, there's probably like 40 or 50 key clients. And so each week, our leadership meeting was with one of those clients in their offices. So we'd go to their hospital. We would go to supply chain and have our meeting with supply chain. And normally in the meetings, the first half hour was with the client. And we'd just say, hey, thanks for hosting us. How are we doing? What can we do better? What are your major initiatives? You know, we always had that dialogue. And then we conduct our regular meeting. And then if it was like a first time or second time in that organization, we would do a tour. And it was always good for us to reground, like, oh, this is when we talk about the hospital XYZ, this is what we're talking about. We've been there. So these are just a couple of simple things that you can do. Have your meetings with the client. Pretty obvious when you say it out loud, but very few people do it. And then the other one was like, if you can work there, it doesn't take a lot of training for some of these other positions to like work there. You can volunteer there. I did that as well. I volunteered 1 hour a week, and I did volunteering forever. So when my kids were younger, I may have mentioned this before, the kids would come with me and volunteer with me. So it was like a great bonding experience and great doing social service together. And then as they grew older and out of the house, all that kind of stuff, I did on my own. And so I would just, take my lunch hour. And I remember switching in my closet. I had the vest, we had wear a special vest and name tag. And so I'd take off my suit coat, put on the vest, and then, go and engage with clinicians and patients. So there's a lot of different ways. I also would do, I'm not sure, I maybe frown on this now, but, I did it. It was called, Wine Wednesdays or something. So it was like, and there was a double entendre with the wine. But I would meet. We had a hotel attached to our campus, and in the hotel was a popular bar. And so every Wednesday night, you could wine with Ed, Wednesday wines. I did walking. I did this for customers and also for my teams that wanted to meet. So deep engagement. So some other day I'll cover how to deeply engage with your teams. That was actually one side example there. But for right now, I just want to stick with operations and the clinical side, business side. So just investing the time to be there. And I'll tell you where it really makes dividends is when it comes time to making decisions, getting people on your side, right? Because there's a finite amount of resources and everyone wants the same resources, but only, 10 or 20%, depending on how you're doing revenue wise, you're going to be able to get, as a whole, right? There's a big basket of 100 things everyone's requesting. They're only going to be able to grant 10 or 20. So the more allies you have, and you develop allies by having deep understanding and these deep cross connects. And I've given examples in the past where when it came time to vote, on who gets those 10 or 20 things that are in that basket full of 100, I would have my peers be the one that are grabbing out the tech things because they fully understood and appreciated what it would do for them. And it would only happen because we deeply embedded ourselves within them. So there's a lot of different ways of doing it, but these are just simple examples. None of this is profound. It's just people don't do them very much, or they do it like a one-time event. It's like a one-off thing. The other times that this is super beneficial is when you're speaking with your peer group, right? So you might have a management team meeting, some sort of leadership meeting, and you can say while you speak, I was in the lab. I spent 2 weeks in the lab to fully understand all the manual processes so that we could talk about digitally transforming the lab and do this. So I worked with you, or I remember when we rolled out digital strategy at one organization, I was able to say and point people out, like when we came to your hospital, Joe, when we were at your hospital, Sherry, when we were in your lab, Frank, when we were in cardiology, Ruth, whoever, but when you were able to call out specific examples, showing the rest, everyone else that your stuff because you've spent deep time in those areas makes a huge difference. So again, I'm so thankful for that counsel I received 30 years ago because I applied it everywhere I went, and it just helped develop those relationships. I'll give you one more example of how this works. And again, I have to say kind of generic. These are all real examples. And if you wanted to contact me, I'll get really specific with you. But obviously, I can't go down into the names or organizations all the time because I don't want to inadvertently offend anyone, or perhaps it was something that was a confidential thing between us. But by going, I had this feedback so much that let me start with this and I'll get to the example I wanted to give. I've had so many of these leaders, especially clinician leaders, come up to me afterwards or years later saying, Ed, you're the first person that ever came to my office. Usually we have to go to the ivory tower and take off our shoes, and they were sort of sarcastic and funny. But you came to us. It makes a big difference. To me, it was like a no-brainer, but in some cultures and some organizations, there's definitely a hierarchy, and your job is to be real and authentic and just break that stuff and get down to it. Well, I'll tell you this one time I went in, and this guy was known as a curmudgeon. Like no one liked him. He hated IT, which didn't help any, and I was the new guy. And So I really was sort of lamenting going, but I'm always the type, I'm going to win them over, And so I went to his office and, sure enough, he was curmudgeon and anti everything and told me before I had a chance to say very much. And I noticed a picture in his office. See, if he'd come to my office, we wouldn't have made that picture connection. But it was of a particular sport of which I'm fond of. And so we connected. I asked him about that picture and he was like so proud of the fact that he had participated in this sport. And so I shared an equivalent example and we sort of bonded. Then he opened up a little bit more and he talked about some other experience he had. And I realized, oh, wait, one of my best friends had that same experience. I wonder if they know each other. And sure enough, they knew each other. And we were given, by the end of that meeting, there were hugs and we had a selfie. And the guy just was my fan. And I was there to support him as well. And it would have never happened if it didn't go to his office instead of having everyone go to your office. Yeah, it takes more time and all that kind of stuff, but it's worth it. Plus, while you walk, that's really important time too, because you run into people, you say hello to people, visibility, you see patients, you see clinicians. It's all really important. So those are just some examples. Have your meetings with the client, with those that you serve. See if you can't actually serve in a clinical environment. And if you can't, you can certainly volunteer. And you could even do, there's no job. That's why when people push back, when I talk about this example, you can learn how to be an anesthesia tech like I was. You can definitely learn how to be environmental services. You can definitely learn some of these different things. So it's not like you have to have a 4-year degree to do some of these. Anyways, have your meetings, both as a team and individual with those that you serve. Try to embed yourself and get real experience, seeing how things are done. And those will give you a lot greater respect and influence in the organization to make decisions. And that's really how you differentiate yourself. I get this question, I mean this in all humility. People always ask, how do I, become like you? What do I do? And I'm just sharing with you, there's no magic sauce. These are all things I learned. Others poured into me and I'm just pouring it back out to you. So there's no pride in this at all. But I'm just telling you, I'm not the smartest, definitely not the smartest. I'm not the brightest, whatever that list is. I'm the average of averages. But what has enabled me to experience above average outcomes and performance is just the simple things and the humble things that I'm telling you. So try those different things, really get engaged. And I just talked about it with the customers, but I think you do it with your teams as well. And you'll have remarkable, remarkable impact in those that you serve and ultimately with your patients. So I hope that helps. Thank you for watching. And I just appreciate the fact that you are interested in growing yourself and you're not one of those people who think that there's no opportunity for them to grow anymore. That's really sad. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people are there, but you're not. And I hopefully never will be either. All right. Thanks for tuning in to Lessons from My Mentor.